Is your answer? King Jabari stepped onto the city wall so that everyone could hear him. My answer is the same as before. I will not bow. The messenger sighed. I feared you would say that. He turned his horse and rode away. Inside the enemy camp, Commander Roland burned the letter. So be it, he said quietly. He gathered all of his officers around a large map. Today we stop chasing shadows. No more small attacks. No more waiting. Tomorrow, we attack with everything we have. Thousands of soldiers sharpened their weapons. Large wooden towers were built. Heavy battering rams were prepared. Rows of ladders were tied together. The enemy was preparing for one final assault. That evening, King Jabari gathered every leader inside the palace. Queen Zalika, King Mosi, Chief Bemba, General Bakery, Elder Kondo, Nuru. Every face showed both courage and concern. Jabari looked around the room. Tomorrow will decide everything. He pointed to the map of Amanzala. If they break through the western gate, Queen Zalika, your warriors will protect the marketplace. She nodded confidently. If they climb the northern wall, Chief Bemba, your hunters will strike from the rooftops. He smiled. They will never see us. He turned to King Mosi. When they begin to retreat, your horsemen will charge. King Mosi grinned. My horses have waited long enough. Finally, Jabari looked at General Bakery. My brother, tomorrow we fight side by side. Bakery placed his fist over his heart. Until my last breath. That night, something unexpected happened. Instead of sleeping, the people gathered in the city square. Mothers cooked warm meals for the soldiers. Children carried buckets of water. The blacksmiths repaired damaged shields one last time. An old woman quietly walked to King Jabari. She placed a small wooden bracelet in his hand. It belonged to my husband. He wore it when he defended this kingdom many years ago. Now, I want you to wear it. King Jabari bowed respectfully. I will treasure it. The old woman smiled. You already have. Before sunrise, the royal drums thundered across Amanzala. Boom! 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 The battle had begun. Outside the walls, Commander Roland lifted his sword. Forward! Thousands of soldiers charged. The ground shook beneath their feet. Arrows darkened the sky. The first ladders struck the city walls. The battering rams slammed against the western gate. Boom! 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 The massive wooden gate trembled. On the walls above, Amanzala's defenders stood firm. Archers released wave after wave of arrows. Hunters hidden between stone towers struck with perfect aim. Warriors pushed ladders away before enemy soldiers could climb them. Boiling water and heavy logs crashed down upon the attackers. Every street became part of the defense. Every citizen played a role. At the western gate, the battering ram struck again. Crack! The gate began to split. General Bakery raised his spear. Hold the line. The warriors locked their shields together. The gate burst open. Enemy soldiers rushed inside. A fierce battle erupted. Steel clashed. Shields collided. The narrow entrance became a wall of courage. Neither side gave an inch. Commander Roland watched from a nearby hill. They're stronger than I expected. One of his officers smiled. They cannot hold forever. Roland remained silent. Something about King Jabari still troubled him. Just then, a loud horn echoed from the southern hills. Commander Roland turned. What is that? Another officer climbed a rock to see better. His face turned pale. My commander. More warriors. Thousands of new fighters appeared across the hills. They carried the banners of smaller kingdoms that had not attended the Great Council. Word of Jabari's courage had spread across the land. Farmers, hunters, fishermen, young warriors, old veterans. They had all come willingly, not because they had been ordered, but because they believed freedom was worth defending. King Jabari looked at the new arrivals in amazement. They came. They chose to stand with us. The people of Amanzala erupted in joyful cheers. Commander Roland realized the truth. His army was now surrounded. In front of him stood the walls of Amanzala. Behind him stood thousands of fresh warriors. For the first time, the invading army had nowhere to advance and nowhere to retreat safely. Commander Roland slowly lowered his sword. He looked across the battlefield at King Jabari. Their eyes met. Neither man spoke. Commander Roland finally understood. This war was never just about weapons. It was about the spirit of the people who refused to surrender. He turned to his officers. Sound a retreat. The officers stared in disbelief. My commander, you heard me. We leave. Slowly the horns of the invading army echoed across the battlefield. One by one, the soldiers lowered their weapons. They began marching back toward their ships. No one cheered. No one celebrated too early. King Jabari watched carefully until the last enemy soldier disappeared beyond the river. Only then did he smile. The people embraced one another. Many cried with joy. Children laughed. The bells of Amanzala rang throughout the kingdom. But Elder Kondo quietly stepped beside the king. My king, this is not the end. Jabari looked toward the distant sea. No, it is only the end of this battle. The true victory will be making sure our children never have to fight this war again. As the sun set behind the hills, the kingdom celebrated. Yet far away on the last departing ship, Commander Roland stood alone at the stern. He removed his hat and looked back at Amanzala one final time. Then, with genuine respect, he whispered, "You never bowed." The waves carried his words away into the evening wind. And the people of Amanzala were one chapter away from becoming a legend that would be remembered for generations. The morning after the enemy fleet disappeared beyond the horizon, Amanzala woke to a new silence. For many days the kingdom had heard drums' marching feet and the cries of battle. Now there was only the sound of birds and the gentle flow of the river. The war was over, but the people of Amanzala knew that victory did not mean rest. King Jabari walked through the city without guards, just as he had before the war. He visited the marketplace where merchants were opening their stalls again. He stopped at the blacksmith's quarter where Nuru and the others were repairing farming tools instead of weapons. He greeted the healers who had cared for the wounded. And everywhere he went, the people smiled. Some bowed their heads respectfully. Others reached out to touch his hand. Children ran beside him laughing. Yet Jabari noticed something else. The city walls were damaged. Many homes needed repair. Fields near the river had been burned during the fighting. Victory had protected their freedom, but it had not been free. That evening, the rulers who had stood beside Amanzala gathered once more in the palace courtyard. Queen Zalika, King Mosi, Chief Bemba, King Darren, and the others sat in the same great circle as before. This time, however, the air was lighter. King Jabari stood and addressed them. You came when we called. You fought when others were afraid. Because of you, our children will grow up free. Queen Zalika smiled. Because of you, we remembered that freedom is easier to lose than to win. King Mosi raised a cup. To Amanzala, Chief Bemba added, and to every kingdom that chose courage. The courtyard echoed with agreement. After the feast ended, Elder Kondo found the king standing alone beside the river. The old advisor looked at the water for a long time before speaking. When you first refused a bow, he said, I feared it would destroy us. Jabari smiled gently. And now, Kondo laughed softly. Now I fear what would have happened if you had bowed. The two men stood together in silence. Then the old advisor asked the question that had been in many hearts. Do you think they will return? Jabari looked toward the distant sea. Perhaps, but if they do, they will find a different land. Not one kingdom standing alone. A people united. In the months that followed, Amanzala changed. The damaged walls were rebuilt stronger than before. New roads connected the allied kingdoms. Farmers shared seeds with villages that had lost their harvests. Blacksmiths forged plows instead of spears. Children returned to their lessons. And once every year the rulers gathered again, not for war, but for peace. The alliance that had been born in fear became a friendship that lasted for generations. One afternoon, Nuru visited the royal palace. He was no longer just an apprentice blacksmith. He had become one of the kingdom's most trusted captains. My king, he said, the young soldiers keep asking me the same question. What question? Jabari asked. They ask why you were willing to risk your life in the tunnel. Jabari thought for a moment. Then he replied, a crown sits on one head. but a kingdom lives in thousands of hearts. If a king saves himself and loses his people, he has saved nothing. Nuruval vipliele. I will tell them. Many years passed. King Jabari grew older. The black hair in his beard turned silver. The young children who had once run beside him became parents themselves. Travelers from distant lands came to hear the story of Amenzola. They asked, "Is it true that a foreign empire demanded your king kneel?" The people would smile and answer, "Yes." And did he refuse? Yes. Was he not afraid? At that question, the elders would laugh. Of course he was afraid. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is choosing what is right even when fear is standing beside you. On the final evening of his life, King Jabari sat beneath the same old baobab tree where he had once spoken with Elder Kondo. The sky was painted gold and red. Children were playing nearby. Music drifted from the marketplace. The kingdom was at peace. Nuru, now a gray-haired commander, sat beside him. "Do you regret anything, my king?" he asked. Jabari looked at the laughing children. He listened to the music. He felt the evening breeze. Then he shook his head. "No, a man cannot choose how long he is remembered. He can only choose what he stands for." He touched the old wooden bracelet the woman had given him during the war. "And I chose freedom." The sun slipped below the horizon. King Jabari closed his eyes peacefully. The people of Amenzola mourned him for many days. But they did not mourn in despair. They mourned with gratitude, because their children still walked on free soil, because their songs were still their own, because their king had never traded their future for his comfort. Long after the palace had changed and new rulers had come and gone, travelers still gathered beneath the great baobab tree. There the storytellers would begin with the same words. Listen carefully and remember. There was once a king who was offered gold, safety, and power if he would only kneel. He refused. Enemies came with ships, soldiers, and fire. He refused. His people suffered, fought, and stood together. And in the end, the world learned a simple truth. A throne can be taken. A palace can be burned. But people who refuse to bow cannot truly be conquered. Then the storyteller would point toward the river where the old walls of Amenzola still stood. And every child listening would answer proudly. That is why he is remembered. Not as the richest king, not as the strongest king, but as the king who never bowed.